Yeah, that's a good shot to open with. I like that.
Hello. How are you?
I'm all right. Good morning. Are you okay?
Yeah, I am. I was
so mesmerised by you doing the big mouth look there that it was kind of terrifying in a good way.
I'm a fearful creature.
We're all fearful creatures and we're all absurd. And once we've managed to address that, we'll all be a lot happier. Welcome to the show. We're just waiting to find Greg Jenner. Greg Jenner is our guest today. Many of you will know him from. The first time I knew about him was working on Horrible Histories. His brilliant work on Horrible Histories, and since then he's written a book which covers pretty much the whole of the history of civilization, and now a whole history of celebrity. And you know, because I first met him, Josie, at a gig that we did together that you put on with Kate Tempest as well. Yeah.
He's been a really, really fantastic supporter of Arts Emergency. It was really, really great. It's funny in my head, like lots of people are sort of categorized as like a good comrade to Arts Emergency, and that's sort of been like indelibly printed on my mind. Yeah, I'm really excited to be talking to him when it's
it's a good book. I read it last night, read it this morning, and it covers Edmund Kean and Oscar Wilde and Miley Cyrus. There's a brilliant line I think where Miley Cyrus is described as something like the 21st century Socrates in hot pants, or something equivalent to that. And we just first of all say as well, by the way, this is now episode about 82. We've done quite a few of these. We started these almost the moment that lockdown began, and there is a reason, by the way, that we don't use Zoom, just so you know, because Trent has got bored of, hey guys, why don't you use Zoom? There are reasons. We do promise you there are reasons that we are, as usual, working in a more arcane and archaic environment. That's what we've always been. Someone said this is the problem with a lot of what we create, Josie. We're very much still an analog generation. We still print the fanzines and we still read the books on paper.
And do you know what? It's too late to change, and I refuse to change.
No, if you haven't got paper cuts after reading a good book, you haven't lived. I've got a show and tell today, which I think you're going to like. As you know, I've mentioned this before. I love old magazines. In fact, tomorrow I might read from the magazine all about charm, which is very useful.
Lovely.
Yes. Or I might even read, what is wrong with modern painting? What is wrong with it?
I've got a pamphlet that Nye Bevan wrote, and it's called "Why Not Trust the Tories?" And it's just so coy.
It's a Gallant's, isn't it? It's one of those beautiful Gallant's books, yellow cover and kind of. That's. I found Jeff from Dylan's bookshop, mobile bookshop. I didn't get my bid in quick enough. He had a pamphlet from 1909 about the Labour movement and a general kind of just how's it all going pamphlet about the Labour movement. And I was going to try and get that to you.
I think somebody who was trying to be rude about sort of the last few years in Labour on my Twitter and was saying Labour now is just a protest movement, and I found it really amusing because I was like, that's sort of really, really counter to what everyone else in the media is saying about Keir Starmer, and B, like, I don't want to have to alert you to the early 20th century, but it's going to blow your mind. Like,
don't alert anyone to the early 20th century.
The history of it.
Let's skip the 20th century altogether. Apart from this particular week, June the 30th to July the 6th, 1963. Because today's show and tell is a copy of the TV Times from the Anglia region. So there might be regional variations in your return to 1963. It's just a classic picture of Raymond Francis and Eric Lander from No Hiding Place.
This is what I miss, and what I wish I could experience more is the locality of media. So, just the Anglia region, but everyone would have bought it. So it's going to sell like 50,000 copies or something. But it's so, and the idea that you'd have your film company making films just for Manchester. It's so exciting to me.
This is what I mean. This is so Monday, July the 1st. I'll just run you through this. Oh, by the way, also, if you buy Quick Brew tea, you'll get money off a 3-pack of nylons. There we go.
And what's the discount? 1 and 6?
It's about it's just over a shilling off. Just over a shilling off. It is about 1 and 6. Yeah. So so on Monday, no television till 4:45. You've got things to do. Thank you. Then it starts off with Small Time with Barbara and the Unkelope. Barbara Brown has never seen an unkelope, but she is still expecting one for tea and wonders what he will be like.
I was trying to play some background music, but it didn't work, and I'm so sorry.
That's all right. And then at 5 o'clock, it's Seeing Sport, in which Calcott Riley will instruct young people on the basic principles of sailing a cadet. 5:25, Huckleberry Hound. And then at 6:05, it's Summertime About Anglia with Bob Wellings and John McGregor, and their leading questions, in which a group of teenagers question a national figure about his life and opinions. This evening's guest is, and this is what you're going to like, Josie, George Woodcock, General Secretary of the TUC.
Oh, come on. See, that was a time when people weren't shy of putting union leaders on mainstream television programmes.
I knew you would love that listing.
What's happened?
And then there's the rest of it, New Breed, starring Leslie Nielsen as Lieutenant Price Adams. And then at 11 o'clock, news headlines, 11:05, Anglia News. And then at 11:08, that's how specific it used to be, Adventures in Learning, Citizenship, a series designed to help viewers think creatively about their own surroundings and the life in their chosen community.
Oh,
Number 10,
God.
The
I like
John.
the past. I like the past a lot. Okay, Greg, this is where we can link into Greg, because something that's very interesting to me, which is about celebrity and history, is that we've often talked about the fact that Jimmy Reed would go on Parkinson, and that at that time there were people who were kind of political, especially from the left, who were kind of a part of culture. Now, when I think about things like Dragon's Den or certain celebrities, The Apprentice, feels like that pendulum has gone completely the other way, and the people who are becoming kind of celebrities without being in entertainment are like capitalists and business people. Is that a thing? Is that a trend?
Let's find out from Greg, but let's not find that out. We're not going to tell you what Greg thinks until you have checked our tip jar and placed something in it. And also to remember as well that Patreon, if you can support us via Patreon, basically our Patreon page, I think, says Book Shambles, but actually what it does is it supports all the different things that we do, not merely that we've been doing during lockdown. And we've given all the money away that we've made. We made some money over the last few weeks, and we've given that to various artists and art centres, and that has all gone. And so if you can support us via Patreon or place something in the tip jar, that will be very, very useful for all of the things that we're trying to create, and the things and the people and the buildings that we are trying to support as well. So have a look at our Patreon. As I said, that covers, it says Book Shambles, but it covers absolutely everything that we make. And also, if you get the chance, pop down to the tip jar.
And if you're free tonight at 8:30, I am going to be performing my stand-up show Tender, which I was supposed to be taking on tour for the foreseeable future, and which I am not. And I'm going to be doing it on twitch.tv or on this very same stream, and you can join in and enjoy it.
Well, now we've forced money out of them. I hope Greg's got a very good answer. Hello, Greg Jenner. Hello, Greg Jenner. How are you?
Hello.
I'm all right. All right. How are you?
Good. Yeah. We're I've really thing, and I watched Bill the other day, which was an absolute 5 years later, but man, it was a great piece of work, and we will talk about that connection to Edmund Kean, who is one of the first stories in your book. But first of all, Horrible History, did that change the way you saw history when you were looking it through, as someone there who has gone through the academic world of history, gone through university, and then you're working out how to make history so alluring to a very broad age group?
That is such a good question, and you've absolutely flummoxed me first thing in. Horrible Histories has been probably the greatest thing I'll ever do with my life, and which is slightly awkward because it sort of means I peaked at 24, but doing it was just the most joyous thing, because at the heart of it was this understanding from the team around me, particularly my producer Caroline, that the history would come first. So although it's a comedy show and everyone loves how silly it is, and we do fart jokes and poo jokes and people falling over, absolutely everything on that show I had a veto on. I could say no to anything at all and we wouldn't do it. And there is no other show like that. Every other show that gets made is sort of, there are all the editorial choices are about entertainment and quality, and do we want to do this and can we afford that and whatever. On Horrible History, this is like, is that true? Yes or no? And if it's not, we're not doing it. So your question about whether it changed my perception of history, actually, no, it didn't, because really what I got to do was bring my strongly furious biases about what is history and put it on television for kids and make it funny at the same time.
That is. Is there one particular story that you had more people than ever saying, Greg, we do not believe this is true. This cannot, because there are revelations. You know, sometimes when my son would run to me and say, Dad, you won't believe who exploded when they were being buried, or whoever it might, you know, and we'd have to go and double check all of that. But that is, there must be some stories where you went, I'm going to have to show you the footnotes now. I'm going to have to show you, you know, that.
There are probably 30 or 40 where the entire team just sat around the table going, no, we simply do not believe that this is true. And I'd have to sort of go, all right, well, let me go get the book and show you. Yeah, exactly that. Because they're often to do with poo and exploding. But there's things like in medieval Europe, there was a very precious metal called antimony, which is a heavy metal. And it would be used as a medicine, and you would ingest it. But because it doesn't digest, it passes out through the rectum, and you poo it out, and you fish it out, and you clean it off, and you put it back in your pot for next time. And it would be passed down as a family heirloom. So you bought it once, and you used it numerous times, and then it would go down to your child and to your grandchildren, and it would be literally passed through and then passed on. And I think that was one of those ones where everyone went, no, come on, no, that cannot be. And it's like, yeah, that's...
Did it have any properties? Did it do anything?
I mean, I'm not a physiologist. I don't know if it has... I mean, if you ingest heavy metals, I imagine it does something. I don't know if it's a good thing. But some of the cures for plague in the 14th century were fairly mad. So swallowing something like that would probably be, in some ways, better than some of the other cures, such as plucking a chicken and strapping it to the armpits. That was a relatively...
that sounds wise to me.
I mean, it's, you know, chickens were available, so that was...
There's a similar scene in John Waters' Pink Flamingos, but we won't go into that now. That's
your answer to everything, Robbie.
Yeah, there's a similar scene in John Waters' Desperate Living. Simon, Charlie Esther. This is one of the things that one of the great joys of, I think, having a child is that your education has to open up, and it is like, I mean, I was amazed when my son was doing his science, and I'm in a fortunate position, but I'm quite enjoying the bits of homeschooling that I am kind of, involved with. But, finding out things like when he said how much of the periodic table were metals, almost the entire periodic table, almost all elements of metals. And I was like, do you know what? I think we're just going to have to check that. And I'm someone who does science programming, but it's one of those things that hasn't really come up. And I went, yep, you're right. You have shaded in all of the correct areas. This is, and that I think is, that's why I love things like Horrible Histories as well, is because it is constantly, every episode has at least one revelation. I mean, not just an interesting fact, like a revelation.
Yeah, and I think what I love about the fact that I get to work on these shows, and I'm making a homeschooling radio show for BBC Radio 4 at the moment, which is called Homeschool History, which is on Monday mornings, and it's the same thing. It's just 14 minutes of sort of fun chat about historical periods. But what's so fun about my job is that I'm learning all the time. I'm forever sort of stumbling on things or looking things up or uncovering things. And the number of times I'm astonished by something that I thought I knew, and then suddenly it's like, no, that's not true. This is true. And you go, well, that's better than what we've got. So many times on Horrible Histories, the writers would pitch something and it would be funny, hilarious. And I'd say, no, I can do better. I can top that. I've got this over here. This is real.
You can't write better than reality.
You can't write better than reality. And truth is almost always funnier than fiction, because fiction to a certain extent is predicated on the mental processes we sort of bumble along as creatives, as comedy writers, as performers, as novelists or whatever. We all have these sort of slight railway tracks we tend to go down, and so we quite often are slightly hemmed in by our life experiences, by our understanding of the world that we live in, by the culture we grow up in, the language we speak. And so sometimes the funnier thing is actually to lift yourself out of, sorry, my microphone's collapsing, to lift yourself out of the modern world that we live in now and go and say, right, okay, but how do people perceive the world in the 15th century? And they perceived it entirely differently. They were just like us in so many ways. They needed all the same necessities that we do, like going to the loo and cleaning your teeth and eating, and they loved their children, and they danced and they sang and they did jokes, all the stuff that we do. But their cosmos was different and their mentality was different. And so sometimes the jokes are just better because they've come from a different human universe.
I remember that was a really exciting part of doing my degree. I did English literature, but I was looking up. I looked up a lot of joke books from kind of the 16th century onwards, and just finding that like there was one particular which I think was from the 17th century that was just so violent, and all the jokes were basically, and then an anvil fell on his head, so he fell off the donkey and he died. How was that? The punchline, it'll be like, a very gentle vicar was travelling along the road, and then a duck knocked his head off. Like, you're like, this isn't a joke.
I think the joke thing is very interesting. I mean, that more recently, obviously, but things like there's a wonderful book which you might know, Greg, Hammer and Tickle, which is all about the jokes during the most oppressive periods of the communist regime.
Oh,
yeah.
And
if we're going to talk about that, we've got to talk about Shostakovich 13. Who wrote it? Is it Yevtushenko? There's a whole bit in it called Humour, about like how the powers that be tried to kill off humour, but humour is the cleverest and most tricksy thing alive, from that exact period. Who wrote it? I think. Wait there, I'm going to look it up.
Well, I mean, and Tim Key obviously is obsessed with is it Daniel Harms, the Russian sort of absurdist writer who was a victim of that kind of brutal regime, and yet wrote these incredibly dark, surreal, absurdist, kind of Kafkaesque stories and jokes that are bleak, and yet at the heart of them is something really funny.
Oh God, who's the author? I'm trying to think of This Way to the Gas, ladies and gentlemen, Polish author, which is, I just read the first couple of stories in that collection, and it is, I mean, that is, well, we must talk about your latest book as well, because I think that, again, that way of the prism to get a sense of sometimes the changing things of humanity, and sometimes the repeated stories. Interesting. You start off the book, the day you start writing is the day that David Bowie died.
Yeah, which is pure coincidence. That's not, that's not, I wasn't waiting for him to die. That would be a very macabre way to begin a book.
Finally.
I had no idea he was ill, as of course most of us didn't. And it was pure coincidence. It was January 2016 that I began work on the book. I'd been given the green light. I ran downstairs with my laptop and went, hooray, I'm writing a book about celebrity. And 20 minutes later, my phone did a sort of, a BBC klaxon. And suddenly this titan of the 20th century was gone, and everyone freaked out on Twitter, on the radio, in the media, because he had been talismanic. He'd been one of the greatest sort of pop culture icons of the 20th century and the 21st century. He was still making good, interesting work, but he had stage managed his death. He hadn't told anyone. No one had an idea. And of course, famously, his album was out that week. He had a brand new album. Fans hadn't even heard it yet. Reviews were just starting to come in. People were going, "Oh, David Bowie's doing really interesting work. This is, this is a dark new direction, but a sort of retrospective, mournful kind of approach. I wonder what, inspired this." And then suddenly he was dead, and there was this grief moment where the nation, or rather more than one nation, that many people around the world were completely destabilized by this icon, this hero, this figure who has always been around, suddenly wasn't there anymore. And it had come out of nowhere. And this is a shock that happens all the time with celebrity deaths. And we had it in 2016 with so many beloved celebrities dying. Prince was, I think a huge one for many people. But we're gonna keep having those sort of moments, because celebrity culture massively escalated in the 60s because of the arrival of televisions into our homes, which then gave us an intimacy and a connection to so many people on our TV screens night after night. So we're going to keep, unfortunately, having these feelings of suddenly being really shook and kind of like, a little bit personally wounded and sad that people we've grown up loving or admiring, or just they were always there in the background, Terry Wogan or Bob Monkhouse, people who just were on the telly. When they go, it is a reminder of our own mortality. So we go, oh God, I'm getting older. And it also, these are people who have often been transformative in culture and society. They've often shaped our values. They've often been a huge part of the entertainment landscape, or the cultural landscape, or the political landscape. And when they go, it is a shock to who we are, because we realised their importance, their impact, and what they meant to us, which we hadn't necessarily always considered. We might not have had their posters on the walls, but the moment they died, we realised, oh no, that person mattered, and I'm sad about it. And so we're losing celebrities a lot now because there are a lot of celebrities, and there have been a lot of celebrities since the 1700s.
Can I really recommend, by the way, if anyone didn't see it a few weeks ago when we had Natalie Haynes on and David McColeman. David McColeman at the beginning did this fantastic 10-minute piece about 2016 about Bowie, Prince and George Michael, and creating this kind of very mythic scene, the way that we can create a myth which in some way kind of gives a sucker, and I would highly recommend that. And can I also say that it's a real joy for someone to be making a very, very pertinent point, and a point which is well worth reflecting on, and also see that their arm is desperately holding up their microphone. Nothing sums up the absurdity of humanity than both a beautiful, serious précis of our relationship with celebrity and also a fear that the mic's about to fall.
That's what I want to say. You know, there's been a lot of bookshelf discourse of late, and I can clearly see you've got a book called Victorian Farm, and I just want to know if it's got pictures in or not. That's all I want to know.
Loads of pictures. Hang on. Where, tell me. Yes, there it is.
It's the only one I can see the title of, and I was like, what?
Yeah. So this is made by Lion Television, the TV show. It was a huge hit. It got millions of viewers, and my friends worked on it very hard.
I'm out of the loop.
It's been a few years old. Basically, a team of 3 historians basically lived on a farm for a year and just farmed it like Victorians would. And they did all the cooking, they did all the agricultural stuff, they did all the stuff you would expect them to do. And it was a documentary series. There was Victorian Farm, Edwardian Farm. Massive success. Yeah, fascinating.
But I mean, in terms of like the food production.
Yeah, I mean, they learned a huge amount doing it. They're a really lovely series of programs. There was Victorian Farm, Edwardian Farm, World War II Farm, Tudor Farm, I think. And it's a very nice book.
I don't know about these farming programs. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail us tell us about somebody else's program.
No, that's fine.
That must be a historical tome with lots of pictures.
It's lovely. But my friends worked on this show, so for a year they were like Victorian farmers. I mean, they were making a program.
Them. Did you have to write them a telegram or a letter?
No, they were available because it's a TV production still. But it's a really lovely thing, and for several years they were making that show, and whenever I wanted to speak to them, they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm on the farm in Shropshire."
Victorian farm.
Yeah, and they'd be wearing the clothes. They're chasing geese around the place. They're trying to get a sort of mechanical tractor going. It's
Victorian farm Christmas as well. Must have been incredible.
There's a whole Christmas episode, and that was my undergraduate dissertation for the history of Victorian Christmas. So I did a little bit of work on that as well. So there was a lovely show, very nice show. So
I wanted to jump the shark.
Talk about another show, but I was like, this is a fun book.
It is a fun book.
I was going to. So Dead Famous, which is why did you decide that was going to be your next book, in terms of, because it's filled with, again, it's got beautiful connections to also a much broader social history than merely celebrity. But what was it that was there in particular? Was there a story that you hit upon that you thought this is something now that needs reflecting on?
The impulse in my career is basically that I'm a public historian, and so my job is to always find ways to engage the public in conversation, trying to get them to enjoy history. As you do in science, you're doing a huge amount of work trying to get people to demystify and not think of science as boring or difficult. And so what I try and do is find out what people are interested in, and then I try and deliver that content to them in a way they might enjoy. So having done my first book about the history of daily life, it was about toilets and showers and food and all sorts of things like that. I realized the next big thing would be what else is a universal force in our society that people don't necessarily realize as a history, but they engage with it every day and they love it and they're obsessed with it. And I was thinking about sport, I was thinking about television and so on, but then it dawned on me no one had written a book on celebrity. And I'm not hugely interested in celebrity culture myself. I love movies and comedy and music and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not like into the Kardashians and reality TV. So for me, it was a bit of a learning curve, actually, and I had to throw myself in, and it took me 4 years to write it. But it really changed my opinion. I went in a little bit snarky, to be honest. I was going to write quite a sort of facetious book, a bit silly and a bit naughty. And then David Bowie died, and I suddenly went, nope, I've got this wrong. I've got to retool this book. I've got to change how I am communicating this, because this matters. It's really important. Celebrity culture is often described as vacuous and superficial, meaningless, it's people in bikinis unnecessarily. It's people doing stupid things on television for no reason. They've got no talent. They've got no skill. Yada yada yada. All those complaints have been made for a long time. It's just not true. Celebrity culture is profound. It's meaningful. It's powerful. It drives our conversations, our ethical conversations, our moral conversations about right and wrong, who we are as a people, who we want to be as a people, what we aspire to be. We have these conversations with our family members and our friends and our hairdressers and taxi drivers about these strangers, and those conversations unite us and help us figure out who we want to be as a society, as individuals. And so celebrities are role models, but they're also transgressors. They push the boundaries, they overstep the line. They are there to sometimes reassert the rules. So we punish them or we cancel them in internet culture, and we say, oh, this person's bad, we hate them, we're gonna stop buying their albums. Or sometimes they do something provocative and bold, and we go, oh no, I like that. That's good. That's interesting. All right, I guess we've moved on as a society. That we're kind of now on board with this. So David Bowie, would turn up wearing makeup and would wear androgynous clothes and would be gender fluid in some ways. And people went, yeah, that's okay. That's all right. We're not gonna ban him from the radio. We're not gonna kick him off Top of the Pops. We think he looks pretty good. And that was a moment where you have a major cultural figure changing the conversation. Celebrity culture does that on a daily basis. Now, sometimes it can be vacuous, sometimes it can be superficial. Sometimes that's the point, is that it's impermanent and it's temporary and it's a bit of fun. But when you look at the history of it, which I've done in this book, and the book is meant to be funny and lighthearted and easy to read, but it is a history book. It's, full of, I sort of sneak some theory in every now and then. But it's a book about what happens when you have 300 years of this short-term temporary stuff. And so I look at 125 celebrities from 1709 to 1950, and to see the impact that they had on society and how they got famous and why they got famous and what it meant that they got famous. What did society take from them? Why were they elevated and others weren't? Why were they then forgotten or cancelled or exiled or, And these questions are extraordinarily relevant to now. And I was astonished the number of times I could find case studies from the 1720s that made me think of case studies from the 2020s. So it was like, oh, okay, this is not a new subject at all. We have Twitch and Twitter and FaceTime and Skype and all these new platforms for delivering celebrity lives into our living rooms. And that's new. But people were obsessed with celebrities in 1709, and we are now in 1720. So in 2020, sorry. So we
11 years later.
I live in the past, and I've only that's my joy for it. Yeah.
Can I ask you what you found? Find anyone who became famous through a very, very unlikely means?
Loads. I mean, Clara the Rhino, was perhaps one of the most interesting ones. She was a 2-ton celebrity in the 1740s. She was an Indian rhino imported into Europe, treated like a rock star. She became a fashion icon. Women wore horns on their hair to look like her. She was on tour for 17 years, like the Rolling Stones. And she had a rider. She had she had to have a certain amount of tobacco that she ate and smoked. She had beer that she drank. She was a sort of big star. We have celebrities who were baffled to find themselves as celebrities. So you have, for example, in the 1930s, you have Gertrude Stein, the great intellectual modernist. She was bewildered to be made famous because she'd been mocked for 25 years for being impenetrably difficult to read, because her modernist poetry was really, really challenging and really difficult. And then suddenly she wrote this really fun, lively memoir called The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, her lover. And everyone went, yeah, it's great, love it, brilliant. And it became a bestseller. And she toured America and everyone went, hooray, Gertrude Stein. And she was like, really? Really? You've spent 25 years taking the piss out of me. And they're like, yeah, but you're nice. You're sort of 60 years old and you're a lesbian grandma. And we're like, yay. So she was
That's the
bewildered.
best time to become famous, I think, is when you've already lived a life.
Yeah, and I love it. I love when you get people like Richard E. Grant getting a kind of renaissance where everyone goes, oh no, we like Richard E. Grant. He's lovely. For a while he didn't have an agent and he was not working so much. And then
That's crazy to me.
And then he's back and Oscar nominated and everyone's loving him. He's back in Star Wars and we're giving him big love. And it's fun when you get those sort of ebbs and peaks in careers and people have to wait 50 years to be discovered. And then on the other hand, you've got, in the book, I've got at least 3 probably child stars. So Shirley Temple, famous at 4. And then Master Betty in 1803 was a superstar child actor. He was English-Irish, and everyone was obsessed with him for about 2 years.
Oh,
and
no.
People smashed down the theatres to go and see him. They pulled out guns and pistols. People were crushed to death in the race to see him live. He was this enormous deal.
What did he do?
He was just an actor. He was just a child actor. But it was a moment in time where everyone was incredibly stressed because 1803 is when Napoleon is threatening to invade. So the country is in crisis. Everyone knows there's this huge existential threat. And so they turn to this cute 12-year-old boy as their kind of release valve. And so he just would go, he toured the country. He started in Ireland, he played Scotland, then north of England, and then came down to London. And people went absolutely batshit crazy for him. And he was a huge star for about 2 years. And then his voice broke and everyone went, nah.
Oh. And what did he do with his life after that?
He went to university, went to Cambridge, and then he tried to do a comeback, and people were like, not bothered, mate, sorry.
Oh, Master Betty, that must have been so hard.
He peaked at 12, which is a story that happens a lot. Macaulay Culkin, Shirley Temple. I mean, Shirley Temple had a fascinating life because she was started at 4. Mm-hmm. She was told she was younger than she was by the studio. They changed her birth certificate to keep her artificially young.
Oh, and, that's awful.
Several people tried to kill her. Including a really sad story. A woman turned up to one of her live radio performances, pulled out a gun and tried to shoot her because she had read in the papers that Shirley Temple had been born on the day that her daughter had died. And she thought that Shirley Temple's soul had stolen her daughter's soul.
That's the saddest story.
And it wasn't true because the studio had lied about her age. She was actually 2 years older than they'd said. So she was very nearly shot down by this lady who was grieving deeply because the studio PR had sort of messed about with the old birth certificate. So Shirley Temple peaked in her childhood, carried on acting as a teen, and then later on became an ambassador. She was one of the US's sort of leading diplomats. You kind of go, that's a weird pivot, but that's what can happen. You can go like one of two ways. So it's very rare for a child actor to keep acting in adulthood. It's really difficult to do. Really
I was going to highly recommend, I think, one of David Cronenberg's most underrated films, which is Map to the Stars. Which is all about, I mean, it came out that it has Julianne Moore, is everyone in it is brilliant. John Cusack, Julianne Moore, the whole kit and caboodle. Julianne Moore should have won the Oscar for that, not for her, the other. It's one of those, it came out the same year as Birdman. And Birdman, of course, did well at the award ceremony because it goes, do you know what? Being an actor is awfully difficult, and we're actually underneath it all. We're smashing. Map of the Stars does not do that, and its view of child actors is it's written by, I forget the name of the guy who wrote Wild Palms as well, which is another fascinating. But I would really, just because you mentioned that, I think Cronenberg's one of his most underrated films, like Spider. It is so. I love Spider. Why? He's a genius. We will. What we haven't done yet, and we're nearly out of time, is check your show and tell.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I've got a couple of things I can show you. Very, very quickly. This is just a little gift I was given when I finished my master's degree in medieval studies. This is can you see this? This is a medieval key. Oh. This is the key to knowledge. So this is 700 years old, and it looks like a key you'd have now. Keys are incredibly ancient technology. We have them in the ancient Roman world, Egyptian world. They are incredibly simple and yet incredibly sophisticated. They can give you secrets, and I just love the fact that this is 700 years old, and it would have meant something to someone. It would have kept their secrets or their important valuables. So I've just got that on my shelf.
Always on the lookout for old boxes and old doors, just to give
it a not. Well, yeah. Just trying to sort of see if I can. Oh, the treasure of the Sierra Madre.
One day.
I suspect it probably wasn't that glamorous, but it's just a cute little thing. It reminds you that the history of daily life, we are perpetuating these ideas. I've got keys on my wallet that look roughly similar like that. The only other thing
to say, follow a number of people on Instagram who are mudlarkers in the Thames.
Yeah.
And I really recommend it to everyone, just in the same way of uncovering things that you go, oh, I didn't realise that different shops had trading tokens, or like that people had disposable clay pipes that they just chuck in the Thames and stuff like that. And it's like the littlest objects, but the most like revelatory stories.
Clay pipes are incredible because where I was brought up, the house where I was actually born in during a snowstorm, that was built on the site of an old inn. And so every time if I went out to do some digging for my dad or gardening, just bits of clay pipe. I mean, it's incredible the amount of clay pipe, because
That's
the
the red butts of the day.
Yeah.
And what
Sorry,
else?
Greg.
Sorry, I didn't
It's
mean
all right.
to.
No, I mean clay. I mean, I studied archaeology as well, and yeah, clay pipes is like the first thing you find. You just find 1,000 of them because they're just basically fags. It's just like it's like finding. I mean, yeah, it's like basically finding Stella Artois cans. It's like it's just ordinary stuff that people are like, oh, I need a hit, chuck it in the bin. The next thing I
Can I
wanted
just
to show
say,
you,
by the way, because you mentioned that, and every time I go on a walk, people who drink Red Bull, because you've got more energy, why not use that energy to actually walk to a bin as well?
but they can't because they're flying. They're flying. They're off
Oh,
the
that's why
ground.
they've dropped it. The force of takeoff means they can't hold fair enough. Yeah.
Also, that was I completely agree with you, and I think it's a correct observation. But it was also the most dad thing you've ever said.
I've always been like this. Long before I was a dad, it was when I see in a river something like that, I just go, oh, there's the beautiful ducklings, and there is the metal energy drink hazard.
What's your other object, Greg?
Other thing I want to show you very quickly. There's a few things around, and I was like, well, maybe I can show you this, but I think you'll enjoy this more. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick tried to make a film about Napoleon, the greatest film never made. And I have a 1,000-page book that is all of the production notes, the script, the photograph, the research, the letters. It's an extraordinary tome, and I will try and show you what it looks like. It's sort of this vast thing of just thousands and thousands of production notes. Sorry, I'm going to do that. Right, so you've got costumes, scripts.
The amount of work.
Incredible. Letters to people. So this is a letter from Audrey Hepburn, who was meant to play Josephine, and she's turning it down. She's saying, so Stanley wrote to her saying, I'd love you to be in my movie. Do you want to play Empress Josephine? And she's written back saying, dear Stanley, it's very, very kind of you. Thank you so much. But I'm actually feeling quite poorly at the moment, and I'm not really working at the moment. So I'm going to say no on this one. But do let me know if you change it. It's a really lovely handwritten letter from Audrey Hepburn to Stanley Kubrick. And that's a letter from Ian Holm, who's possibly going to be in the movie.
As Napoleon?
No, he was going to be a smaller role. Napoleon was going to go to... There were 2 actors up for the role. I can't remember who they were, actually. There's a German actor and a British actor. But
I was just thinking, because he was Napoleon in Time Bandits, wasn't he? Yeah.
So there we've got letters from Kubrick, and then you've got all the production notes. Kubrick entered into a 2-year relationship with a historian, just sending him endless letters about what were ice skates like in the 1800s, what were hats like, what did they have for lunch, what did he have for breakfast, what was his favourite type of cheese, like just endless notes. And this historian's writing back going, dear Stanley, well, he quite liked this type of cheese. And it's just an amazing book. Wow. And it's not that expensive, actually. It's a gorgeous piece of publication, and you just get these historical lessons, you get kind of what he wanted to do with it. Steven Spielberg has been trying to turn this into a TV series, and every year they sort of kind of go, it's going to happen, and then it never happens. But this is the film. 50,000 Romanian soldiers were going to be used for the battle scene.
50,000 people.
So they're going to use 40,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry. So it's this enormous 1,000-page book. And it's got these gorgeous, lovely sort of moments, and the entire script from the film. The opening scene is Napoleon, aged 4, cuddling his teddy bear. So it's one of those ones you're like, that's a film that kind of exists as a book. You can see what Kubrick was going to do with it. I mean, you know how he would have filmed it. He would have shot it with probably candlelight. He would have shot it with fast lenses and an enormous. The number of extras they are planning for. The budget is extraordinary, but it got blown out the water when Waterloo came out in 1970, and they went, I need to do it. Sorry. And he was also working on a Holocaust film, and then Spielberg gazumped him with his obvious Schindler's List. So twice he sort of had this masterwork he was trying to put together, but because he was Kubrick, he couldn't do it in 2 years. He had to do it incredibly detailed, and meant other directors came along and basically pulled the rug out from underneath him. So
it's fantastic.
It's a lovely book, and not that expensive. I think I got it for 60 quid, I think, and it's possibly even cheaper now. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I just had that image of you being that man from the Fast Show, that getting back and your partner's saying, "Did you get the Horlicks and the tomato soup? Even better, 1,000-page book about Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon." If anyone went to the exhibition, the Stanley Kubrick exhibition last year at the Design Museum, you will have seen that just the first room was remarkable. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. And Dead Famous is out now, and of course, like many authors at the moment, it's a terrible time to have a book out, but hopefully also it's a good time because people are having more time to read. And having started reading it last night, and Edmund Kean and Marley Cyrus and Oscar Wilde and all it's a really interesting book. And I think you do have a great way where you have a lightness of touch, but at the same time that doesn't in any way make the information in it or its content facile. It's great. So highly recommend Greg Jenner's Dead Famous, and hopefully we will see you back in the outside world one day.
Hope so. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for doing it.
Pleasure.
We have tomorrow we have Francesca Stavrokopoulou on, who is a brilliant. She's an atheist Bible scholar, and you may well have seen her on various debate programs. If you haven't, go and have a look, because there's some very funny appearances she had on Big Questions. She's based at Exeter University, and we're going to be talking to her. And we also have I think it's Daniel Luke Peacock. Have we got Daniel Luke Peacock doing music tomorrow? Daniel Peacock. There we are. I'm never. That shows how now I'm an age where I can't remember. If someone has three names, it's long gone. Dick Dyke Van? No. Okay. Josie, what are you up to?
Sorry?
What are you up to?
I'm going to attempt to do some work, which is going to be fun for a couple of hours. And then me and my daughter are going to make a stained glass window using sticky back plastic and coloured tissue paper. And I imagine that event will take me 20 minutes to prepare and her 1 minute to grow tired of.
That reminds me of the great Chick Murray joke. We've got stained glass windows. It's those bloody pigeons. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. And just a reminder as well, Patreon, if you can go and support us via Patreon, it says Book Shambles on the Patreon site if you go cosmicshambles.com. But in fact, the money we use is for all of the different things that we make. And it's science stuff, it's literary stuff, it's art stuff, and it is these shows as well. And the tip jar as well. As I said, we managed to give away £15,000 in the last few weeks to art centres and artists who are finding it difficult. And we would like to still keep that going as well, and I know there's a lot of different things out there. And I know a lot of you are giving to a lot of different things. So thank you very much, everyone who is able to support us. And do not worry, those of you who are not able to. Of course,
that's not why this is there. And also, if you want fun, tonight is my show 8:30 till 10:30 with a little interval in the middle. And tomorrow night is the Quarantine Comedy Club with John Luke Roberts, another man of three names. John Luke Roberts, me, siblings, Johnny and the Baptist, and Mark Thomas. So that'll be really, really fun.
Robert John Luke is great, and and also over the weekend we have two science shows. We have the Kids Science Show on Saturday morning. Sunday afternoon we have Hannah Fry and Matt Parker and Helen Chersky, and then next week we've got Sean Corliff. We've got my friend, who some of you might have heard the book Shambles we did with her, which was I really recommend listening to. She's very fascinating and a very interesting story. And we should also have Phil Jupitus next week. And now we are got someone that you will have seen before with very often his outfit 1201 Alarm, or if you've been to any of our live gigs, he often plays them. Very often he plays his laser harp. And today Steve Thompson has, I think, a cover version that some of you will enjoy a great deal. Thanks very much. Hope you can support us via Patreon. Subscribe to YouTube. Bye.